And welcome everyone to the Sunny Days in Detroit show. Pasq and Pat today. No Pavo. Lost his voice. He's feeling a little under the weather. Um, Unfortunate circumstances, right? Season did not go. Well, the season didn't end the way we thought it would on Sunday. And that sucks. But
Yeah.
what we're going to do today is kind of recap everything we saw in 2023 quickly and talk about some of the good, some of the bad, and maybe some of the outlook on the future of this team and this organization.
Yeah.
To start things off, there was a few monkeys taken off the back of this team, and that's definitely like when you look back on this season, you really do need to think about that, right? Because the wound is definitely still fresh. This sucks. This sucks. Like there's no sugarcoating it. You're up 24-7 at half in the NFC Championship on the doorstep of the Super Bowl. You don't want to be doing this type of show today. But if you take, as a fan base, all of us back to Labor Day weekend, and maybe you're at a barbecue and you're talking to some of your friends about football and the Lions specifically, I think most of us said they should absolutely be in the playoffs. Like that was at a minimum,
Yeah.
right? I hate predicting wins and losses. You know, like I guess I kind of looked at them as like at best they're a 12 to 13 win team. At the worst they're a 9-win team. That's where I thought they were, right?
So, I mean, I think when I talked to this Powell way back, I think I had like 11. So I had my 2 games better than last year without really knowing how much better or worse any team on that schedule had gotten. Like just kind of assumption that the team's gonna be somewhat similar from the year before. That was my guess. And they obviously exceeded it far and away, like in my opinion. Like even though it was like I think one extra win, I think realistically like what they did far exceeded my expectations on the field.
Going into every season, we're always reminded, or we were no longer. Now we don't have to hear it anymore. We were always reminded of haven't hosted a playoff game in Ford Field, right? Mm-hmm. Ford Field was built in 2002, and the Lions had yet to host a playoff game there, and they've yet to win a playoff game since '91. Yeah, none. Yet to win the division since '93. Mm-hmm. So, on a positive note, and truly a positive note, like not looking at a silver lining here, a truly positive note. This team, this organization as a whole, I'm going to say organization because it's not just the guys out on the field, right? It's Brad Holmes, it's Sheila, it's Chris Spielman, John Dorsey, all those guys in the front office helped, and ladies, helped develop this organization, this culture, what we watch every Sunday, Thursday, Monday, whenever they play, right? Mm-hmm. They got some monkeys off their back. They won their division, which was a huge milestone in itself. Now, like we knew up to that point, hey, this isn't enough. You've got to go win a playoff game. But that was a monkey off the back of the organization. And then they host a playoff game against a guy that was, call it what it is, the face of this franchise, one of the few people that made this team relevant for a long time. They host a playoff game against that guy, and they beat him. And then they go to the divisional, and they win there. And unfortunately, as we said, they lose in the NFC Championship. But I think when you look back at this season, it ended in a heartbreaking fashion. But man, like they really had a season to remember. They truly did.
I mean, I think you nailed something right at the beginning, like just like kind of like the top-down approach that they took. And I think what we saw that was different from this regime versus the past, I don't know, 4 or 5, I've like, really remember as an adult and kind of like really following like in a really granular manner. I think you saw what Sheila came to the table with that was different from every other hiring cycle was she brought EQ to the table. We always talk about what's your football IQ, what do guys do when they look at resumes, who they worked for, what teams they were a part of. It seems like Sheila took like the EQ approach. Chris Spielman, a guy that's just a football mind and has a very, very emotional attachment to the city of Detroit. They wanted to embody that within the team. They did that through Dan. They did that through Chris. And with Dan, he was very much like scoffed at during the hiring phase. Brad Holmes, not considered a bad hire, but also wasn't like super high on a lot of radars as far as the next GM. So the fact that they went outside the box, that was a kind of like the status quo of the next guys up within the league. And they kind of went against the grain in that respect. And then it worked. And then you saw the way these guys develop players and the way that players respect these guys and react and are committed to them. The way you're seeing coaches turning down jobs to stay here. There's just something to be said that's being built here. And the fact that they did it with everyone scoffing, laughing, Dan Campbell's takes, crying, biting kneecaps, everything that went along with it, they took it in stride and just showed everyone why they were wrong. They kept saying the same things over and over, from the players to the coaches, top down, that they were committed to this, that they got the right guys, and they put proof in the pudding. They showed up and they did it. We've been told this story time and time again. We always believed it because you knew you had the quarterback, but you always just believed, okay, this regime is going to get it right. Never happened. They finally did it, and everyone across the board played at a high level and was like, I didn't feel like there was any starter that wasn't a reason for this success. Everyone made a big play at some point in the season that was probably could be attributed to a win. Goff, third receivers, fourth receivers, secondary like players on the defense. People made plays all season, and that only happens within good systems, within good cultures. And like that's just it's just. I'm just getting excited and like getting goosebumps just talking about thinking about the future and all this.
I think that what they really shook this year is the same old Lions moniker, the same, that phrase that like hurts. It hurts. And I'm a Met fan, so I hear it with the Mets all the time. And, Steve Cohen bought the Mets and we have still yet to see any playoff success, but like, we have seen some organizational changes that seem to be trending up, but like that was something, in Detroit, like after last season, they ended on a high note, right? They the Seahawks had won, so the Lions were automatically out, but they're on paper, nothing to play for, right? But the goal was, hey, we might be going to hell, but Green Bay, we're dragging you right with us. But still, even after that,
yep.
Excuse me, after that, there were still people that said, well, yeah, but you started 1-6 and you needed to beat the Panthers and you didn't. And, you kind of had a chance to beat the Bills and you didn't. Like this year, they overcame all of that. Right? They won 12 games. This team's won 12 games like one other time, and I think that was 93 when Barry Sanders was on this roster, the greatest running back of all time. Like they not only they won 12 games, they won their division, but they made it to an NFC championship, and as much as they blew it, they were in it the entire time. Right? And like I guess to kind of bring things to the NFC championship here, it's really frustrating, but what we have to remember is that team on the other side, like they're allowed to score too.
Yeah.
And they were the home team for a reason. They were the 1 seed for a reason. They're really fucking good. And now they're going to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it sucks to lose that, but at the same token, like those guys are competing too. Those guys are trying to win too. And I do want to clear this up here. So if you follow us on Twitter, I'll do a video for pregame, halftime, and final. And I was just defeated for the final, and obviously,
Hard not to be.
and I kind of in my video, I criticized Dan Campbell a little bit. And I think still looking back, part of me says you probably should have kicked. But like when after days to process it, I'm not necessarily taking back what I said, but some of those guys could have came down with balls. Gibbs maybe shouldn't have fumbled. There were a lot of other things that led to that. And if I could clear anything up, I'm not blaming Dan for losing that game. I was upset with him. Part of me is still a little upset with him, but if Dan doesn't go for it on fourth in the divisional round and the first game, the wild card round, we're probably not in this situation. We're probably not in the NFC Championship, right? So that's something I had to remind myself of this week. I really did.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. So it's easy to kind of have like knee-jerk reactions after the game. It's like I think the easiest thing to go to is always the coaches because like it's hard to remember every specific play that led to that outcome. So it's like always like coaches blew it. We were up 24-7. There's no reason we shouldn't have lost. We should have lost that game. So it's like that just like it's so easy just to kind of like default to that mentality. And then when you like look back, you get some time to kind of decompress, relax about it, and you actually look at the game. You're like, you know what, like Dan Campbell can't. He's not catching the passes on the field. He can't sub in for Josh Reynolds and catch those 2 passes. They were two big moments for Josh Reynolds, and as good as he's been, could be the reason they might not re-sign him because those are the moments you need guys to show up for at the end of the day. And like that is a difficult situation for him to be in, which I'm not catching those balls. Like I'm not like that's a huge stage to be on, but. I think a little bit, maybe team was feeling themselves a little too much. Thought they just had the game in the bag, and San Fran was like, "No, we're gonna make this a game." Saw Brock Purdy scramble for like 2 20-yard rushes, and it just seems like I hate to say wanted it more in the second half, but that's the way it felt.
I feel the same way. I would hate, and we're gonna talk next week. We're gonna talk future of the organization more in depth. Some guys that have expiring deals. But I would really hate to not have Josh Reynolds here. I think he's a guy that's
fantastic. He's exceeded my expectations.
He's a guy that's progressed. Insanely. He has progressed so much from when he got here. And it just sucks that it happened. And you don't want to see it happen to anyone. But it truly sucks that it happened to Josh because Josh, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he caught the ball against the Rams, like when fourth or third down.
Oh, he was like the key receiver in that game because they put on a focus on Amon-Ra. He had like I think one of the biggest games of that game. It was like Amon-Ra then him. Like if memory serves,
it just sucks that it happened to that guy because that's a guy that's progressed so much. He's got a great and I do think I have a feeling he'll be here next year because Goff's going to be the quarterback next year, right? And I think as time goes on, we're probably going to start talking an extension for him at this point, right? He's on an expiring deal.
Like it's all a matter of like how long it is. Like there's all kinds of conversation around that. We can get into that in another episode. And we kind of
That leads me to Josh Reynolds. He's a guy that seems to be very comfortable with Goff. You would probably assume if Goff's going to be here a while, the organization's going to want a little bit of his input on who he's throwing the ball to.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about.
It's definitely an interesting conversation because I have no idea. Like, again, we'll look at like who's in free agency stuff like that, who's other viable players because he's going to be 29 like this in a couple weeks. So a little on the older side, so it should be a cheaper acquisition. So I don't think like that should restrict him from retaining him from like another 2-year deal like he did last time, like something similar to what they did. But maybe the market's bigger for him out there now that he's had a couple good seasons with the Lions. So that's the other thing to think about. It might not be so much they don't want to bring him back. It might be like he's commanding more money in some teams that are more receiver starved. And like, is he going to take? Maybe he will take 4 to go for a Super Bowl versus 7. I don't know. Like that's all up to a player, right? So it's like I think they will try to bring him back, but I think there could be a bigger market for him than we're giving him credit for because he did have 2 pretty damn good seasons.
Yeah. Something to think about though. If you remember Week 18 against the Vikings, when the Lions could have just kneeled the ball, they were doing as much as they could in that last drive to literally just throwing Josh Reynolds screen passes just to get him to hit the incentive, which I think he was still short of. But like things like that carry within an organization, right? So like when Josh Reynolds is listening to like other offers, if let's say he's commanding $8 million a year over, let's say 3 years for let's say $24 million contract just to round things out. I don't know what he'll actually get, but let's say that's what he's commanding. And you've got team A that wants to give him 8, let's say 8, team B that wants to give him 7.7 or something with incentives. And the Lions kind of come up to him and say, listen, we're extending Goff, Panay, and Amon Ra. There's really not much after that.
There's not
We've got
much to
other
go
holes
around
to
right now.
fill. If you want, you could come back here and play for, we could do 5.5 with incentives, that type of
Yeah.
thing. Like maybe that makes a guy like Josh Reynolds think like, all right, you know what? I mean, I've got a good relationship with Goff. He gets me the ball. We know each other. He knows what I'm going to do. I know what he's going to do. I'm probably more likely to hit maybe one of those incentives. And you know what I mean? Like,
I
and
think
nothing's guaranteed in the NFL.
yeah, and I
So,
think
like, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, where I go with this because again, like I think you just kind of nailed it on like the people we have to sign right now. We need Panay, we need Amon Ra, we need Goff are all going to be signed. You're right there. You're talking about $100 million in cap right there. So we're like there is most of our money, and at the same time, they're probably going to go out and get Snead or Marcus Lattimore because I cannot imagine they're going to bank next season secondary on a rookie first rounder to be the guy. I just don't see it happening. They're going to solidify that corner. I think maybe they re-signed Emmanuel Mosley on a really cheap incentive-based deal. I think that's one that could be super incentive-based, veteran minimum, incentive-based contract. See if Emmanuel can come back after 2 years straight of injury because he was a great player beforehand. I think they could do something like that while simultaneously signing like a higher-end free agent and the cornerbacks. And then at that point, I just don't think you have the money to bring back like an expensive receiver 3. I just don't.
Yeah.
And like, it sucks because it's just the business. And I think if he does take a team friendly deal, that's the only way he comes back, really.
Yeah. People are talking about, people outside of Detroit, outside of this fan base. We're talking about, they really need a wide receiver 2 for next year. Like they've got that. It's Jameson Williams.
I think this offseason, if JMO and Goff aren't figuring it out in like their first 6 games or so, and it still looks a little off, like I don't know what to make of it. But suspension, even though they had the offseason, it still kind of throws off like the rhythm of everything. So like you just gotta give benefit of the doubt because it started to really look good. It's kind of like moving into like middle December and on. They started figuring out using Jameson, I think, better just in schematically. And then even Goff, I think, was starting to kind of figure out the timing a little bit. I obviously JMO dropped like one hit him in the face on the sideline. One, he just couldn't track properly. So I think there's just a little bit of they just got to kind of get on the same rhythm of where Goff's placing the ball and where he's looking to track it. I think there's just like a miscommunication there. If they can tighten that up, it could be very fun next season.
I think there's got to be some level of a gun to the head here between Ben Johnson, JMO, and Goff. Like someone here's got to break, right? JMO is way too talented to not be getting the ball almost as much as Amon-Ra St. Brown is. I mean, I understand St. Brown's the better receiver. He's got the better hands. He's the better route runner. There's no doubt about it. But JMO's got tools that no one on this team, maybe Gibbs, like in terms of speed, who's faster than JMO? Maybe Gibbs. I don't know anyone else.
The craziest part of this is and it drives me a little crazy to talk about it like this, is JMO has been highlighted by a lot of analysts, and I watch these videos. I'm like, God, like it is just a beautiful thing. Like the way he takes off the top and opens up the middle of the field, which is, we all know where Goff likes to throw it. They use him in that fashion where he just opens up the middle every time because they have to account for him going deep. So like that, even though it's kind of decoyish, and I hate the idea of a 12th overall pick being a decoy, but the fact that he can do that and open up the entire middle of the field for Laporta, some St. Brown, Reynolds, and all those guys, and if they don't account for him, then Goff can just let it rip. It's not the worst thing in the world. I think these haven't. I hope there's more rip next year because I do want to see more deep. I just think it's a chemistry thing, but I do think we need more of those big plays. I think that's why we're in a lot more tight games than we'd like to have over the course of the season. Like we just didn't have any like game breakers that really set like the tone. But yeah, I don't know. I do want to see more out of him. Like he went for like 400 yards this season, 500 yards, and like it's just. You want to see more production out of a 12th overall pick, no matter how you twist it. And like, I think we need to see that next step next year. And I do think you started seeing it. His route running was getting so crisp when he would do little like button hooks. He just put guys on skates because he just stop on a dime and the cornerback would just keep going. It was like, it was a thing of beauty. And I think we're going to see more of that next year. But again, it's you never know until you actually see it.
Yeah. I mean, next year certainly it's got to come together because it's year 3, which obviously doesn't feel like year 3, like we said, between the injury and the suspension.
Yeah.
Let's transition here. Let's talk some coordinators, right? So we went into last week's game thinking, okay, we went into the playoffs thinking probably in all likelihood Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson are gone. And then as things started to shape up, we went into the NFC Championship thinking, all right, we're probably losing one of these guys. It's just a matter of we don't know who.
Yeah.
Fast forward to right now, Ben Johnson, which the report that came from Schefter, let's laugh at that for a minute. But
I don't. Yeah, there's all kinds of weird stories coming out about this.
but Ben Johnson, calls St. Brown and basically says we have unfinished business.
Yeah.
And I couldn't sleep last night. I can't leave Detroit, blah, blah, blah. That's awesome, right? That's huge. Glover Quinn did a video on Twitter talking about it, basically, a lot about having the continuity of talking to the same guys, having the same guys preach to you day in and day out, and getting into that rhythm. And now next year you really can hit the ground running,
Yeah.
and you don't have to deal with a speed bump of a new coordinator or new this and new that. So I think that's great for them.
Yeah, and I think there's, again, if you even go beyond that, without Ben leaving, all the reports were saying that he was taking Frank Haley or Hank Fraley.
Fraley.
I always fucking mix it up.
We got to have like flashcards for you.
Dude, I really do. So I knew a guy named Frank Haley, Frank Haley in high school. So that's why this really fucks me up. I knew a guy with the exact opposite name. So, and then so like with him still retaining and us needing to fill a guard position, and I think I don't know where we're going to get that in the draft, but the idea of having him still here to kind of train that guy up to be like a legitimate Jonah replacement is huge. Or even Stenberg, maybe that he takes a big leap in year 2. So I think still having him here to help guide that offensive line. And again, we'll get into another episode, but the Frank Ragnow kind of murmurings happening right now. So there's some other things of we really want that line continuity to happen and still be there. What
are you hearing with Frank Ragnow?
Oh, he's assessing
retirement
with all his injuries, man. He's apparently said I'm going to kind of take some time, reassess, kind of think about how I want future. I think he's absolutely coming back this year. I think there's no way he does it, but I think we see with all of his injuries and the foot injury he has is it's irreparable. So you can't do anything for it. So he's got to think about long term. Do I want to be in a Walker when I'm 40, or do I want to play for 5, 6, 7 more years? I get it if whatever they want to do, but I don't think we'll see how much merit there is to it. But that was just a quote they took from him. And the media ran with all the Detroit media. It's hey, what I want to do and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens there. But if that does happen, you got Glasgow to slide over. Maybe Stenberg fills a position, draft a guard, and that's why I think those next replacements for some of these line guys. 30, you don't want to keep paying guys high money as they age. So you got to start backfilling these guys over time, which is going to happen over these next few years. So I hope we can keep these guys for fucking ever.
I think I'm right there with you. I think me and Pavo were talking about it. I don't know, last week, 2 weeks ago, about where we think they would go in the first round of next season, and it really wouldn't shock me if you see them take an interior offensive lineman first round there, picking wherever they are, 28, 29, especially just because typically you have a lot of tackles go. The offensive linemen that do go early are typically tackles, and a lot of teams don't value, just like they don't value running backs going in the first round. A lot of teams don't value taking guards and centers first round either. So you could definitely get one of those interior guys that you graded really high. There's the opportunity to get them at 28 through 32 and even part of the second round. I think we lost Pat here. Yep. Yes, we did. We got 3 people in the comments here, so I'll go to the comments in the meantime while we get Pat back. Stevie Mack, Montgomery was killing them up the middle. I'm surprised they didn't ride him even more. I was a little surprised myself with that. I thought we were gonna see a little more of him. And Pat's back. Pat, I was just answering Stevie Mac's question here.
Yeah, I was giving you shit about your fucking charger. I forgot to put mine in.
It's all good. Um, Stevie was talking about Montgomery not getting more of the more playing time after he was killing them up the middle. I was
It's
saying how I thought the same thing.
And isn't it funny how we talked about as like one doing the biggest keys to the game and winning, and then they just went away from it and started passing the ball in the second half, and then it just got away. Like we talked about, like it almost like it sucks in your armchair coaching, and then it ends up being like what
Right.
should have happened, and that's why they lost.
Yeah.
But again, that's one of those things. Like Ben is a great coordinator, and that might be one of the things he thinks about. He's like, you know what? I've still made some mistakes this season that I wish I could get back. I think I probably need another year of this, another year of learning, another year of tutelage from Dan to like really understand what being a head coach is. And like, I think that humility in Ben is one thing that just makes me like him even more.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think when when Dan was hired, and I think Brad said it too. Check egos at the door, something like that, or like no egos within the organization. And I
You can't.
think you see that.
They practice what they preach, right? And like I think that's just like a huge piece of everything that's happening. But again, I think just having that continuity. I said it in the last episode. I do honestly think, as ecstatic as I am of having Ben Johnson back with the veteran leadership on that side of the ball, I'd feel better about replacing, to an extent, about replacing him versus a Glenn, because Glenn is a great leader in my opinion. I think he's a guy players really resonate with, and has been dealt kind of like a shit hand in terms of like talent he's had to like work with. He's developed it though, and he's turned it into a formidable machine. Even like with Iffy and the way he came around at the end of the season,
Yeah.
and he was by all potential purposes like injured and like really a non-factor for 2 years, and still had the confidence in what he saw in him and developed to be that guy. And he was correct. And I think it's a really interesting piece of AG and like what he does. And like I think him with another good defensive draft, Aline taking another step, Hutchinson taking another step. Maybe they get another guy like on the defensive line, another cornerback in the draft. I think they don't need much more to be really good on defense. And I think you're going to see that in free agency, a little bit in the draft. And you get him and his guys. Emmanuel Mosley got hurt like pretty immediately. Like CJ went down immediately. So like the two guys they brought in to make it a better defense weren't available pretty much all season, and he's still like from like mid-season on put together a pretty good unit and like game plan. Like didn't always show on paper or by the score, but like if you go back and look at the games, like they did a really good job in the red zone. Like they had some big plays, and like that's typically how teams scored on them was like a big play, not so much like in the short field. So it's keeping these guys gives me a lot of confidence of being able to repeat. They lose one or the other or both, like that, definitely puts a little bit of stab to the heart to make you kind of be cautiously optimistic, I should
Yeah.
say.
Yes. Absolutely. Or a slow start looming.
Yeah, figuring out this first few weeks with a new system, new play caller on both sides of the ball. Like, how are they developing the rookies versus the old guys? And, like, which I guess comes down to a little bit more position group. So you still have those guys in place. But we also didn't know how many and who of the current staff they would poach with them. So there could have been we look at it as two guys getting replaced. Could have been more like 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, we don't know. But it's 0 now. So who gives a shit?
Yeah. Thank God. All right. So we're coming up here on a half hour. Pat, do you have any closing statements for the 2023 season?
Yeah, I'd like to give some shout outs to some players. I think on the defensive side of the ball, some of the guys that impressed me most this year, I think both fall in the middle of the field. I think Anzalone and Derek Barnes ended up really stepping up from previous years and showing a lot of
Yeah.
grit. Let's just use
Yeah.
the word. A lot of grit. Made me feel a lot better about the linebacker position. The guys can kind of train up Jack Campbell, another young stud kind of in the making. I think that was a really good year for them, and it makes me feel really good about that unit. And I don't even think it's like a need now, like when we look at the draft and things like that. So it's cool that they kind of really took a step forward, and that could be attributed to better play around them and things like that. So that was really cool. Offensive side, I'll give the flowers. Goff had a great year. Everyone, no anyone watches. I'm not the biggest Goff fan. He still has deficiencies I don't love, but like he showed way more than I give him credit for, and mostly when he was making some good throws. That was my biggest thing. It was always like he played the script, played everything well, made the right reads, but never really took chances. I started seeing some of those chances this year, and it really made me happy of like how he was handling it and like fitting some tight windows, making some tough throws, and that gives me confidence in a guy like that is a bit limited in his skill set, not in throwing the ball, but like anything outside of that pocket presence and like doing things out of the pocket. And it was really nice seeing that this year and kind of gives you confidence in any extension. And again, we'll talk about what that extension looks like and we'll eventually see what it is. So him as well. And then also Graham Glasgow. I mean, Frank's an obvious one because he's just a fucking warrior. But Graham Glasgow, I thought had a hell of a season this year and really went under the radar. Even when he had to fill in for Frank Ragnow at center, playing guard, he was phenomenal this season. And he's also made Jonah Jackson expendable. He's going to be cheaper. They don't need to keep Jonah, and he played better than Jonah this year. And he has more continuity. I think him, Frank, and Decker, they're fucking boys. So like they have that like kind of bromance going on. So it's like that was like a really good showing by him as well. And then obviously Laporta, just an amazing season by that rookie tight end. So there's just my kind of like a few shout outs on both sides of the ball of guys that kind of exceeded my expectations. And I think like we're only going to benefit in the future because of it.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you on pretty much all the guys you spoke about. I'm in the same boat as you. I'll still say that Goff has some deficiencies, but he exceeded my expectations this year, especially in the NFC Championship. Like, was he perfect? No, but how many quarterbacks are? I thought he did almost everything possible.
There's nothing in that game that I would put off for. Like, they got a couple of bad throws, but like nothing that wouldn't be expected by any quarterback. So it's like the drops are what killed them, and I'm not going to put those drops on. They were in the hands. Like, it could a couple made plays like slightly better, sure, but that's still not on him. You can't throw every ball fucking like you can't hand every ball to the receiver.
I'm very okay with. I think I'm very okay with the organization extending him.
It's what it looks like. It's what again. I don't. It's not my money, but I just look at it like I look at his age, everything he's doing, where this organization is. Like in my mind, it's a 2 to 3 year extension. They already have him next year. A 2 to 3 year extension, locking him here for the next 3 to 4 years makes the most sense in my mind. Everyone's like, "Oh, give him 5 whenever he wants." I'm like, "Why do you need to lock up a quarterback till he's 35? That makes no fucking sense." Like I just don't get that. But he's deserved and earned this next contract, whatever it looks like, and whatever the team thinks it should be, and like that's up to them. And again, I also think this is a team, you've seen them do it with some veterans when they first got here. You see them do it with veterans now. If there is a day where he kind of starts sliding and is not playing well, I don't think this is the organization that will hesitate either. Like, so it's like, I'm fully confident in what they're doing and how they built this team for Goff to succeed going forward. And again, well, opinions are subject to change. So this is always, everything's fluid in sports. Like, a guy
Nothing's written in Sharpie.
You never know when a guy's going to hit his cliff, hit his peak, and kind of fall off the other end. It could be next year. It could be 5 years from now. Like, they could be fucking, maybe he's the next Brady and plays till he's 45. Who fucking knows?
Right. If there's 2 other guys I could give some flowers to, because you, like I said, you touched on all the guys I thought were spectacular this year. Two other guys. One, we didn't see him in the end of the year, but Colby Sorsdale. This was a guy that got thrown into the fire quite a bit and wasn't spectacular, but you're talking about a day 3 pick out of William and Mary, an FCS school, nobody's on nobody's radar, and he held his own. Did he play great? No, but guys like that are not supposed to play great in their first year. He held his own. He wasn't a liability, and I will absolutely give him that. That impressed the fuck out of me. Mm-hmm. And the last guy, Ife Melifonwu. I didn't think the guy should still be on the team. I was looking at him the way I look at Levi Onwuzurike. Yeah. You're injury prone. I haven't really seen you do anything, and when you're in, you show me nothing. So there's no use for you.
Yeah, like you're only around because of your physical profile and nothing else.
That's it. And if he proved me wrong, and I'm so happy to say that. This is a guy that, like, honestly, we'll talk about it later in the offseason, but if you tell me you don't want CJ Gardner-Johnson next year, I think I'm okay with that. If you're telling me you want to start Iffy, I think I'm fine with that. I mean,
I
it's
think
it's
with
going to be an extended conversation there, but
yeah, it is, and I think with the cornerback being a bigger priority and some good guys in free agency, I don't think you can bring back CJ and one of those corners. So I think he's just going to be an odd man out because of how if he stepped up.
yeah.
And I'm 100% with you on Colby. I said Stenberg earlier. Forgot he got cut. He was the old fucking guard before
I was
Colby.
going to say,
Yes. Okay. That's who I meant to say earlier, and I'm 100% with you. His run blocking was really good. He needs to tighten up the pass side of things. But yeah, I think you're right. A guy coming from that kind of school and being thrown into that situation, like can't ask the world of him, right? Like this
Yeah.
guy's never faced this level of talent, and then when keeping that considered, like wasn't the worst performance in the world by any means.
no, definitely not. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned throughout. I don't know if we'll do something this weekend with the Sunny Days Media Football Show, recapping the championship round, but we'll be doing stuff through the Super Bowl, and Sunny Days in Detroit is still going to be coming at you weekly, talking all things off season. So stay tuned to the socials, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Cheers, guys.